Shri Radhe Radhe. There are lives in which the hand of the Lord becomes visible only when we look back, and few lives show this more beautifully than that of the great devotee Shri Narsi Mehta, in whom helplessness was transformed into bhakti, humiliation into grace, and every hardship became another step towards Krishna. There was a time when nobody looking at this quiet, dependent young man could possibly have imagined what he would one day become. He possessed neither wealth nor position. He did not distinguish himself through worldly achievement. To those who measured a man's worth by his usefulness in practical affairs, Narsi perhaps appeared to have very little to offer. And yet, this seemingly insignificant man would become one of Gujarat's most beloved saint poets, a devotee whose songs would continue to be sung long after the kings, kingdoms, and wealthy households of his age had disappeared. But what makes the life of Narsi Mehta so extraordinary is not merely the miracles associated with him. It is the setting in which his devotion flowered. Krishna would place him inside family life. He would know marriage, children, poverty, responsibility, humiliation, bereavement, social opposition, the difficulty of arranging marriages, the anxiety of feeding guests when there was nothing in the house, the shame of having no money when society expected money. And it was precisely in the midst of those ordinary human anxieties that his extraordinary relationship with Krishna would reveal itself. The Lord would not spare Narsi the world. He would show Narsi how to find him inside it. Again and again, when worldly arrangements failed him, the Lord would become his arrangement. When human beings withdrew their support, Krishna would come closer. When money could not solve a problem, Bhakti would. When honor was taken from him, the Lord would restore something far greater than honor. And somewhere along this long journey, the relationship between Narsi and his beloved Krishna would become so intimate that the boundary between prayer and conversation would almost seem to disappear. But every great river has a source. And the great river of Narsi Mehta's bhakti begins in a most unexpected way, with a little child who could not speak. Before we come to that child, however, there is a beautiful tradition regarding who Narsi Mehta was believed to have been in an earlier age. The great Sri Nabhadas Ji, whose Bhaktamal Granth preserves the glory of the devotees of Bhagwan, is associated in devotional tradition with the understanding that Narsi Mehta was none other than Muchukund, the illustrious son of King Mandhata, who had appeared again in Kali Yuga. The story of Muchukund is itself deeply connected with Krishna. Muchukund had spent an immense period of time assisting the Devs in battle. Exhausted by warfare and longing only for rest, he received a boon that whoever disturbed his sleep would be reduced to ashes by his glance. Many years passed. Then one day, while being pursued by Kalayavana, Shri Krishna entered the cave in which Muchukund lay asleep. Kalayavana followed him inside and, mistaking the sleeping king for Krishna, disturbed his rest. Muchukund opened his eyes and reduced him to ashes. And then Muchukund saw before him the beautiful form of Shri Krishna. What value could kingship have after such a sight? What attraction could worldly power retain when Bhagwan himself stood before him? Muchukund realized how much of human life disappears in the pursuit of things that cannot accompany us beyond death. His heart turned towards the Lord, And devotional tradition remembers that this longing for Krishna would find another expression in Kali Yuga, when Muchukund appeared again, not as a king, not as a warrior, but as the simple devotee, Narsi Mehta. How beautiful is that thought? The king who had once stood before Krishna would return without a kingdom. The warrior would return without weapons. And this time, instead of conquering enemies, he would conquer hearts through the name of Krishna. And even that voice would first have to be given to him by grace. Many centuries ago, in Talaja, in the Saurashtra region of Gujarat, Narsi was born into a Nagar Brahmin family. His father was remembered as Krishna Damodar Dasji and his mother as Lakshmi. His full name was Narsingh Ram Mehta, though he became lovingly known simply as Narsi. In due course, the family came to live in Junagadh, beneath the ancient and sacred hills of Girnar. There is a beautiful image in the Bhagavad Mahatmya, which becomes especially meaningful when we think of the appearance of Narsi Mehta. Bhakti Devi, devotion herself, is described as speaking to Narad Muni. She says that she was born in Dravid, grew in Karnataka, traveled through Maharashtra, and by the time she came to Gujarat, had become old and weak. Then upon reaching Vrindavan, Bhakti became young and radiant once again. What a beautiful way of describing the movements of devotion in this world. Bhakti herself is eternal, yet there are times when her presence seems strong and living, and other times when devotion becomes hidden beneath pride, argument, external distinctions, and worldly preoccupation. And then a saint appears. Not necessarily with political power, not necessarily with scholarship that silences every opponent. Sometimes he comes simply with a heart overflowing with love for Krishna. And through that one heart, devotion begins to spread again. Narsi Mehta would become one of those hearts. His Krishna Bhakti would eventually fill Gujarat with song. His devotion would not remain limited to ritual or outward identity. In Narsi's vision, a true Vaishnav had to become tender within, to recognize the suffering of another, to live without pride, and remember Krishna in every circumstance. But all this lay far in the future. For now, Narsi was simply a little boy, and sorrow entered his life very early. When Narsi was still very young, traditionally said to have been around 5 years old, both his parents passed away. The little boy was therefore left largely in the care of his much older brother Bansidhar and his grandmother, Jayakumar. Jayakumar was a deeply pious woman. She loved the Lord, and she loved this orphaned grandson who had now come under her care. But Narsi had another difficulty. He could not speak. Devotional tradition remembers him as having remained without speech through his early childhood, up until the age of 8. Other children would many times mock him. They could speak. Narsi could hear them. He could understand them. But he could not answer. And the sight of this caused tremendous anguish to his grandmother. The child had already lost both his parents. Now he could not even express himself through speech. Jayakumar tried whatever she could, but above else, she prayed. Somewhere in her heart there remained a conviction that the Lord would hear her. The Lord who had created this child could also open his voice. And so she continued to pray. Then came the day which devotional tradition remembers as the first great turning point in the life of Narsi Mehta. It was the season of spring. The trees and plants were putting forth new life. Flowers were blooming, the devotees were visiting temple for darshan and worship. Women gathered to sing the names of God. Jayakumar too went to the temple, taking little Narsi with her. After completing her worship, she was about to return when her eyes fell upon a Mahatma sitting in one corner of the temple. He was seated upon a tiger skin and absorbed in the name of Narayan. There was something remarkable about his presence. She stopped, went closer. Keeping a respectful distance, she bowed before him. Then she drew little Narsi towards her. With tears in her eyes, she spoke to the saint. "Oh Mahatma, this child is my grandson. His parents have passed away. He is approaching 8 years of age, but until today he has not been able to speak. His name is Narsi. Other children mock him because of his inability to speak. In my old age, when I see his helplessness, my heart becomes deeply troubled. Please have no mercy upon him. Please bless my grandson so that he may speak." The Mahatma looked at the child, and then he said something that must have sounded extraordinary to the grandmother. He declared that this child would one day become a great devotee of Krishna. The world saw a silent boy. The saint saw the Bhakt hidden within him. The world saw what Narsi lacked. The Mahatma saw what Krishna was preparing him to become. He beckoned Narsi closer. According to the devotional account, he took water from his kamandal and sprinkled some drops upon the child. Then he drew Narsi near and softly instructed him. "Child, say Radha Krishna. Radha Krishna." And then the lips that had remained silent for years began to move. "Radha Krishna." Again, "Radha Krishna." The child began to speak. As the first words remembered upon his tongue were the names of Radha and Krishna. What a beginning for the life of a devotee! Jayakumar had prayed only that her grandson should receive speech. The Lord gave him speech and placed his own name upon it. Before Narsi became a poet, the name became his first poetry. Before he sang of Krishna, Krishna entered his tongue. Before the world ever heard the songs of Narsi Mehta, the first song of his life had already begun. Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna. The people present in the temple were astonished. The grandmother was beside herself with joy. For years she had longed to hear this child's voice, and now that voice had awakened through the name of God. She bowed again and again before the Mahatma. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she praised him for what had happened. But the saint did not accept the credit. He told her that whatever happens in this world happens by the will of the Lord. "Do not think that I have done anything," he told her. "Express your gratitude to God and pray for the welfare of all." Jayakumar requested the Mahatma to visit their home. Her grandson, Bansidhar, Narsi's elder brother by almost 14 years, was a well-placed official of the government and would make lavish arrangements. She longed for an opportunity to serve him and asked him to bless the rest of the family as well. But the saint wanted nothing. He told her that he did not visit people's home without reason, and that he would now continue on his way, returning to the mountains in the service of the Lord. Before leaving, however, he is said to have given Jayakumar one more assurance. A time would come, he told her, when this child would be married to a good girl. That part of Narsi's life belonged to the future. For now, the grandmother returned home overflowing with joy. She told Bansidhar everything that had happened. When he heard about this remarkable Mahatma, he too became eager for his darshan. A search was made. People were sent to find him. But the saint had disappeared. No one could find out where he had gone. He had appeared, blessed the child, placed the name of Radha Krishna upon his lips, and then he had simply vanished. In time, a beautiful belief arose among devotees. They said this was no ordinary Mahatma. Perhaps the Lord himself had come in the form of a saint for the sake of the child who would one day spend his entire life singing his name. And from that day onward, the life of Narsi began slowly to turn in the direction of the Lord. The silent child had received speech, but the purpose of that speech would reveal itself only gradually. As Narsi grew, his attraction towards the company of devotees, temples, prayer, and remembrance of God increased. The ways of the world did not draw his heart in the same way. This difference between Narsi and those around him would eventually become a source of tension within the household. His elder brother Bansidhar was responsible for the family and occupied a respectable position. The household enjoyed every comfort and immense social standing. Narsi, however, was of a different disposition. His attention was increasingly drawn towards the Lord. And living in the same home was Bansidhar's wife, Gauri. The old accounts remember that Gauri was often irritated with Narsi and spoke to him sharply. Again and again with her words she wounded him. But then came one particular day, a day which at the time must have appeared completely ordinary. But from it would emerge one of the most decisive events of Narsi Mehta's life. Narsi Mehta returned home from outside. He was very tired and thirsty. He requested his sister-in-law for some water. It was a small request, but Gauri got very angry. Instead of giving him the water, she spoke to him in terrible, harsh and taunting words about his uselessness and lack of contribution to the material welfare of the house. The sting of her words struck Narsi almost physically. He trembled with their onslaught. Then he did not remain there to argue. He did not drink the water, simply left the house. Those few words would change the direction of his life. There are moments when a very small event becomes the instrument through which Lord turns an entire life. A sentence, a rejection, a poisonous humiliation, something which appears unbearable at that moment. And yet, when seen many years later, it becomes clear that the Lord used it to move his devotee towards something infinitely greater. Narsi walked away. He went towards a nearby forest where there stood a temple of Lord Shiva. The words spoken to him had affected him so deeply that according to traditional account, he went there feeling that it would be better to leave this world than continue living with such humiliation. He entered the Shiva temple carrying that grief. And there before Mahadev, the sorrow which had brought him from his home began to turn into prayer. There is something profoundly beautiful about this moment. The man who would one day become famous for his love for Krishna first carried his broken heart to Shiva. Mahadev, the great Vaishnav, Mahadev, the compassionate Lord, Mahadev at whose feet the rejected and the distressed have always found refuge. Narsi had left one home and unknowingly reached another. He began to worship Shiva with intense concentration. The outside world gradually receded. His humiliation, his thirst, his anger, his pain, all of it was now placed before Mahadev. Tradition tells us that Narsi remained absorbed in worship for 7 days. Food ceased to matter. The needs of the body ceased to matter. The hurt which had brought him there was slowly becoming something else, an intense turning of the heart towards God. And perhaps this is one of the deepest truths hidden in the lives of saints. Pain alone does not make a saint. Everyone experiences pain. The transformation begins when pain is carried to the feet of the Lord. Narsi had been wounded by the world, but instead of allowing that wound to harden his heart, he carried it to Mahadev. One day passed, then another, until 7 days had gone by. And then, according to the sacred tradition, Mahadev responded. What happened after those 7 days would divide the life of Narsi Mehta into 2 parts. There was the Narsi who entered the Shiva temple, and there was the Narsi who would emerge from it. For Mahadev would not merely comfort him, he would give Narsi something beyond anything the young man could have imagined. He would open before him the doorway to the divine world of Krishna, the world of Radha, the world of gopis, the world of Ras, the world in which God is not merely worshipped from a distance, but loved. And the man who reached that temple because he had been denied a little water would soon drink from an altogether different source. The man who had walked there wounded by a few human words would receive something so precious that one day he would look back upon the very incident that had driven him from home in an entirely different light. But that is where we shall leave Narsi today. Before Mahadev, his eyes closed, his heart surrendered, his old life behind him, and an unimaginable grace waiting just ahead. Perhaps this is the first great lesson Narsi gives us. We do not always recognize grace when it enters our lives. We recognize the answered prayer. We recognize the unexpected blessing. But what about the event which breaks our plans? What about the humiliation? What about that closed door? What about the moment we would gladly erase from our life if we could? Sometimes God does not remove the thorn immediately. Sometimes He uses the thorn to turn our feet towards Him. Jaya Kumar's anguish had driven her to prayer. Prayer had brought a mysterious Mahatma into the life of a silent child. The Mahatma had awakened Narsi's voice with the name of Radha Krishna. And years later, another painful moment had now driven that same Narsi to the feet of Mahadev. One event was quietly joining itself to another. Narsi could not yet see where the Lord was taking him. But grace had already begun its work. The silent child had found his voice. Now the devotee within him was about to awaken. And in the next episode, we shall enter one of the most extraordinary and sacred episodes in the entire life of Shri Narsi Mehta. What happened when Mahadev finally answered his prayer? Until then, may Shri Narsi Mehta ji bless us that the voice Krishna has given us may also learn to call his name. May the faith of his grandmother teach us to continue praying even when the answer seems impossible. May Mahadev take the griefs and humiliations that enter our lives and turn them towards the Lord. And may the names that first awakened upon the lips of little Narsi, Radha, Krishna, awaken with love within our own hearts. Shri Radhe Radhe.